Yeah, so you go to cast Firebolt, and you'll do the same kind of damage, but it's not fire damage, it's necrotic damage.
Yeah, you do Firebolt, but suddenly it comes out as like a black fire, and it's necrotic damage instead. It's like,
Yeah.
what's...
And instead of setting things on fire, it causes things to, like, wilt
Yeah,
and
no, I
die.
mean, that would be a really cool secondhand magic item.
Alex, you have our delving deeper topic for today.
I do. Well, I was at work the other night, and I was thinking about our conversation about lycanthropes.
Mm,
And something I was thinking about that came up with this strange, interesting idea, I think, is secondhand magic items.
okay, so, like, an item that was owned by somebody else, and then you came into the possession of it?
Yeah, either, well, in one case, a lot of ways that you're getting secondhand magic items in games is usually from loot.
That is true.
As an example, those
That
would
is true.
technically be secondhand items. You're taking it off somebody's corpse, and it's magic, it's a secondhand magic item. Or you take their hand, and now it's a third-hand magic item. Who knows?
Yeah, actually, when you start to think about it, most items that you receive in games would have been owned by somebody else at one point.
Right.
Unless you, like, got them from a store or you made them yourself.
Right, unless they're new. But I was more along the lines of maybe you have a merchant who specifically sells secondhand magic items.
Mm.
These are gently used magic items. They may not be as good as real magic items. They might be used. Maybe their enchantments have worn off a bit. But they're still magic. So an example I had in mind was, say you buy you want a magic sword.
Yeah.
Okay. These are generally really expensive.
Mm.
And in 5e, as our prime example, because it's the one we're most familiar with, you don't really get a lot of magic items handed out to the players as often as older games tended to give.
Sure.
So let's say you guys are fighting lycanthropes. Well, their damage reduction is for magic or silver. So unless you're going to go out and find someone to craft you a silver weapon, or you just so happen to have a magic weapon, it might be hard to deal with those.
Yep.
But maybe you go to the secondhand magic shop in town. Maybe it's a big city. Maybe it's a traveling merchant. Doesn't matter who it is. Secondhand magic items. And they happen to have a magic sword.
Mm-hmm.
And they go, this is a gently used magic longsword. It costs 500 gold. And, basically it's what you would have as masterwork in older editions. I don't think 5e has masterwork anymore.
I don't think so.
But masterwork, what it used to be, is an exceptional version of that weapon, which just give you a +1 to attack rolls.
Okay.
Instead of the +1 magic weapons, which are +1 to damage and attack and are magic.
Right.
So in this case, maybe it's a gently used magic sword. Perhaps the enchantment isn't that great anymore. It's kind of wearing off. Or it's old and dusty. Maybe there's a chance to restore the magic to it later if you wanted to get into storyline things with it. But the idea is that it's a secondhand magic sword. Maybe it only gives you +1 to damage or +1 to attack, but it also counts as magic for the purposes of overcoming magic damage reduction. Or perhaps it shines and glows like a torch does, which a lot of magic items can do.
Okay. Yeah, I can see this. Hey, you know where it would be a really good place to actually sell these? At that fantasy thrift shop we were going to start.
Yeah.
These would be great items for that. Here's a fun idea on that topic. Is Spellbook.
Spellbook?
Yeah. But here's the great thing about the spellbook is that it's a used spellbook, it's not yours. So for a wizard, this might be really useful because now you have a book that has all these spells written down in it, and it can be very costly to put those spells into your own book. And you have to find them, and you have to, collect them and everything like that. But what if, like, the person who had this spellbook had a very specific way of writing it all down that you don't necessarily understand?
Wizards do.
Yeah, as they do. And so there's every time you do a spell from this book, you have to roll a percentile or something to see if it backfires or it has a wild magic component
Yeah,
does
that would be
something
fun.
that does something you didn't intend it to do. And
I
if you
think that
like,
should.
if you roll a 1, the book just incinerates. It
Yeah, I
just
think
sits
that should be something in general as like a mechanic for spell books that you're not familiar with.
Yeah.
I think that's fun. I had a wizard that was also a druid that I made forever ago that I had the concept for, and being a both multi-class wizard druid, going druidic, all his wizard spells were written in blood because he was a necromancer, so he'd use the animal blood as ink. And they were written in blood in the spellbook, but also written in druidic.
Oh, fun.
So you had this wizard tome written in blood in druidic, so it's a secret language, and it's necromancer tome. So it's like, all right, well, you have to know that this is a, arcane spells written in a druidic language to decipher it.
Right.
It would be like, yeah, you can steal my spellbook, but there's really not much chance you're going to be able to use it.
Yeah, exactly. Also, gotta be fun when you come across a lich and you steal their spell book. Because I had always heard people go, hey, if you want to do something really easy to, collect a bunch of spells, just find a lich and use their spell book. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, but how did the lich use the book? And am I gonna know what any of it is? And is that book cursed? Is it a book of the dead?
Listen, if a lich has a spellbook and they are a lich, that means they are powerful enough to probably have cursed their spellbook. For anyone that touches it, that's not them.
Exactly. And hey, it could also just be that the spellbook, maybe it's a blank spellbook that you can actually use, and it's not very expensive, but it's also not made of very good paper, and so the ink will run, and or it is easily worn and tattered.
Oh, even better on the lich idea. Maybe you have a secondhand spellbook. It's mostly empty, but the pages in the front are all torn out. So it's actually empty, but it's missing pages that presumably had spells on it that someone removed.
Right.
But perhaps it belonged to a lich or something, a vampire, whatever. It doesn't matter. Some undead. So maybe every spell that you pen in that book then makes that spell become a necromancy-based spell or count as necrotic or undead, or it counts as that type of
damage
spell,
yeah,
instead of its normal type.
Yeah, so you go to cast Firebolt and you'll do the same kind of damage, but it's not fire damage, it's necrotic damage.
Yeah, you do Firebolt, but suddenly it comes out as a black fire and it's necrotic damage instead. It's it's...
And instead of setting things on fire, it causes things to wilt.
Yeah,
die.
I mean, that would be a really cool secondhand magic item. These things could be fun mechanically because you could make interesting, slight, subtle magic items that aren't really powerful on their own.
Sure.
But could add flavor or help out and be cheaper than getting powerful magic items. In the case of the in the case of the slightly used magic sword, it would be all right, well, instead of spending at least 1,000 gold on this magic sword that's just a base magic weapon, you're spending half as much, and it's not quite as good, but it still helps.
Right.
And in the case of the spellbook, maybe it's all right, well, it's just a spellbook. It looks a little fancy. Maybe it's got a nice purple and black cover, and you think it looks cool,
Right.
And then it does this.
Right. It has an inscription in the back, and you don't know what it's for, and that leads on a whole other Yeah, no, those are definitely fun. It would also really help just with some of the commonly used magical items, I think. You have the boots of springing and leaping.
Boots of Elvenkind.
Yeah, stuff like that, and maybe they just, maybe they're worn in, maybe they have a weird fit, maybe they just don't allow you to do quite as much as you normally can. Maybe you don't jump quite as high.
Right.
Something to that effect. Or maybe
ogre strength.
Or if it's the one that's the springing, I think that helps with your jump distance. You can jump, and you can. I would like one. I think a really interesting one is the enchantment that was made on it was unstable, and so if you decide to use it,
poorly magic items.
Yeah. So and when you use them, you have to roll a D100. and whatever the number is the number of feet up in the air that you jump.
That would be a very quick death.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. It's like that does change the dynamic a bit as
It comes with a backpack of parachute.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's sold together. If you don't buy it together, it's your own fault.
Yeah. I do kind of like that because it's like, okay, I got to get up the side of this building. Okay, how high up is that? It's like 40 feet. So now you have a very specific range you need to hit on that die for this to be a workable solution if you decide to use the spring. Because too little and you just smack into the wall and fall down. Too much and you just like go right over the building and down.
Maybe you've got like a cloak of spider climb or something like that, and when you activate it, it turns you into a spider, but the duration is 2 hours and no less.
No less, yeah. You just have to stay in that spot. Or
so it's suddenly you can climb the building, but now you're sitting at the top of it for the next 2 hours as a spider.
You could do the cloak of Spider-Man climbing, and that way, if you get into like a nervous pattern, all of a sudden the sticking doesn't work anymore, and you fall back.
I think the trick is that you want these items to be either not quite as functional as like full magic items would be, not super powerful.
Sure.
Maybe they could be whimsical to add some fun, kind of like the boots of springing, where these could be actually useful, but they can also be quite dangerous and also just hilarious. I think a nice mix of that. I mean, if you're having someone with a secondhand store, like an antique shop kind of deal, it's a wide range of things. So having a shop like this could be really cool to add just some flair, some flavor, some interesting items, and some options to players.
Yeah.
I know, I was thinking about it because of our game, where there's not really anywhere in town you can buy magic items or anything like that. I mean, there are items you can get from from the quests in the locations. But what's the point of giving you guys hundreds of gold?
Right.
Without giving you anything to spend it on.
Yeah, what are you really going to use? And it is true, like in Phandalin, and I think in a lot of just the small hamlets that are dotted around Faerun, it's not like magic items are a big focal point for D&D and 5e, as it was in earlier editions from my understanding. And so you'll come across it, but it is not very common that you do.
Right.
Which does definitely make encounters like lycanthropes a little bit trickier. But the fact of the matter is that you might at least see in some small towns with adventurers wandering through the possibility of encountering those items that just didn't work anymore and had to get pawned off for whatever reason. And just aren't as good, and probably means that they're far less expensive. Magic items are very, very expensive, typically.
Yeah.
And
if you're finding new loot and better magic items, what are you going to do with your old ones?
Yeah, you're going to sell them off. You're going to sell them
off, or you find someone who can salvage them for whatever reason, or... But yeah, and then always, of course, if you have adventuring towns, there's no reason someone that has a caravan couldn't come through.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that it's more fun if you have the ones that are just like definitely seem like they're going to have a potential negative consequence, just because that always makes it fun. I'd like to see like potions of attraction, but it doesn't really specify what's going to get attracted to you. That's always a good one.
That's great because great. Oh, it's a love potion. It's a potion of attraction.
That's right.
What does it attract? Moths.
Find out. Yeah, it attracts moths. It attracts Naga. And then you just
swarms of rats.
And kegs. All of a sudden you feel tremors underneath the surface.
It's a real good thing you guys didn't take that charm with you.
Yeah, that would have been bad. The one that I'd like to see, because I think that you could do a lot. Have you ever heard of the Bag of Tricks?
Yeah.
Yeah, Bag of Tricks is great as a magic item. I really like it. When I was playing Snowball and DC told me that I pick a magical item, basically, you're supposed to pick like an uncommon magical item for each character. Bag of Tricks is what I took.
Yeah.
And it's great because actually when we got to the boss battle, I ended up like rolling. What did I roll? I rolled the 6 on it, and I had a brown bear that I was able to just pull out. I think it would be funny if you had one where you could make your own list of animals from like the 1 to 6, but there's a possibility it is not under your control when it comes out.
Possibility it's not suited for the environment that it's in.
That is also possible.
I pull out a shark. Just watch it just flop around.
Yep.
Dies.
We didn't pick the aquatic bag. What are we gonna do now?
Whoops.
Yeah. I would love to be able to see, like, especially, like, if you had one that came from, like, Chult, and so it was all dinosaurs, like, each thing that you... But there is a possibility, like, you have to, like, make a wisdom saving throw or something to keep it under your command, because if you fail at any time to keep it under your command, it could potentially turn on you. That would be chaotic. I think that's the thing. Secondhand magic items feel like they could very easily become a chaotic force for your party if not used correctly.
As Graveyard posted in our moderator chat, picks up a secondhand cursed sword at the local chaotic Goodwill.
We need to... Well, now we know what the cover is for this segment, right?
Yes.
It's just the Goodwill, but the chaotic Goodwill. That's perfect. I do. So really what we're talking about is secondhand magic items coming into the chaos ensues. We don't know what's going to happen. Or basically the magic item, but not really as good kind of category. A lesser version or an erratic one. I think that there is a third category, though, which is the magic items that have a history worth exploring.
Yes.
And that is an interesting thing, too, about rings that have inscriptions on them that might lead you to its original... Yeah, that lead you to the original owner, or something to that effect that leads you on a quest line all themselves. The spell books that have unique spells or languages you have to learn to uncode, and you might learn really powerful things from them. Stuff like that. I think that would be really interesting too, especially for low-level characters, because as they increase, they might actually look at how they can grow based on those items, and, how they might be able to, increase their skills over the course of time, because they had those. Almost like you're leveling up your items as you're leveling up your character. Like, if you get them early on, getting better because you're more familiar with it. Maybe you learn the history of those items. You learn the arcana of them. That would be interesting, too.
That's a whole other can of worms.
It really is.
Also, in the chaotic Goodwill, can of worms.
Can of worms. Yeah, exactly. It's, but the worms are like those giant worms from Dune.
Yeah. 100%. You open it up and it's just a worm. Just...
Yeah, exactly. And you realize that they're just going after the spice fields again.
This feels like something you'd have as an arcane trickster.
Yep.
With a bag of tricks.
Yep.
And they are caltrops that explode when you step on them.
Perfect. That would be great.
Anyways, if you have ideas for some secondhand magic items you think would be fun to add to a game, or just interesting, or if you think this idea is neat and you might want to use it in your game, let us know. Because it could definitely add a lot of flavor and some fun options to any game, even not D&D.
Yes, any kind of game would be good for, these kinds of things. I imagine some people might have done something similar to this. They might not have called it a secondhand magic item. But if you have examples of one that you've used, please let us know. You can catch us over on our Discord channel, which is a public Discord now. And you can also find us over on our Anchor page if you want to leave a voicemail.